Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We will get started in just a few seconds. So just as a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded and you will receive the recording via email after the conclusion of the live event. So definitely keep your eyes open for that email. At the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session, and throughout the webinar, you can use the Q&A box in the platform to jot down any questions that you have, and I do have some helpers that will be answering as we go. And then just as a reminder, if you have any audio or video issues, the best course of action there, just refresh your browser and that should fix everything. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. I'm so happy to be here with everyone and be presenting for you today. We are going to cover creating client reports from start to finish. So this webinar is part of our Mastering BrightGauge series, where we really want to give you the tools to be equipped to create reports or dashboards or gauges in your account on your own. So we'll go through full client reporting. So to kick things off, introduction and also what's new with BrightGauge. So your presenter today is myself. My name is Julia. I am the manager of the partner success team on the BrightGauge team. I've been with ConnectWise almost 4 years now. Absolutely love it. I would say, the best thing about it is really working with partners and creating relationships. I love chatting with you all, so it's been really fulfilling. So for today, we are going to cover what makes a good client report. So what are the components that are important to think of? We'll cover client mappings. That is essential for sending client reports. We'll cover report templates, scheduling reports, and then modifying any existing scheduled reports. And at the end, as mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session where I will read off a couple of questions out loud and make sure that we answer a few of them live. But if you have questions throughout the session, you can use the Q&A box in the platform, and I have some lovely helpers that will be answering as we go. Just to mention one more time, this is recorded, and if you have registered, you will receive a recording via email. So don't worry about if you need to leave or if maybe your team member couldn't make it, you can share that recording with them after. Okay? All right, so a couple of BrightGauge updates. We always want to share what's new with you. If you're in your BrightGauge account, if you click on the Home tab, which is the BrightGauge logo here in the top left corner, this will bring you to our landing page or our home page. Oftentimes this does get missed. Maybe you have the Dashboards tab bookmarked. So we really wanted to point this out because we will share latest updates here on that first tile. You can see product updates, new features we've released. Here we're showcasing the new dashboard list view. And then we also have our events listed here as well. So today's webinar is there in the center. And then you can also see any past events that have occurred. Our last webinar was another Mastering BrightGauge series, and it was focused on goals. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go to the BrightGauge window, click that logo, go to the past events. It'll show you all of our past webinars, and that one's definitely great to check out regarding the goals feature. Okay, so a couple of components to what makes a good client report. So we do want to kind of cover, what are the questions that you need to ask yourself before you create or send a report? So who is your audience? Are you sending this report to the service manager or the CEO? the audience really matters, and that will determine what kind of content you have in your report. So the second question is, what metrics do you want to share? What is going to be relevant to the end user? What will be understood by them? And what shows the value that you bring? So the metrics, of course, the contents are very important. And then the scheduling. So when should you schedule the report? Do you set them up on a recurring basis? Are they monthly? Are they quarterly? What makes sense for you and your end clients? So it is important to tailor the report to your audience. So as mentioned, are you sending this to the service manager, or are you sending this to an owner or a CEO? The contents would vary for each audience. So it's important to customize the report to meet your client's specific needs and preferences. It's also important to include data that's relevant and actionable. What can be actioned so that in the next QBR that you have with them, you can see some improvements. The data. So obviously the data is the bulk of the report. This is the meat and potatoes, if you will. Crafting a report or a summary that highlights the main findings. So we don't need 10-page reports. You don't want to come up with a case of, too long, didn't read. So it's really important to offer highlights and make sure that it's understood by the end user. One thing that Brightgauge is amazing at is having just really easy to read, nice looking charts and graphs. So Brightgauge is definitely a tool for, clarity, simplicity, and using different visuals to enhance the data that you're sharing. The delivery of the report is quite important. Typically, we might think, okay, first of every month is going to be when we send reports, but that might not always be the best date. So deciding on, when the client expects the report or when makes sense to then send the report in order to have a follow-up meeting, having that discussion to provide additional context to the client is going to be important. The reports that you send, you want to have those conversations because you want to receive continuous feedback or have, room for improvement so that you and your client can communicate and the data is understood. Okay, so what are the building blocks of reports? There are really two main steps here. So the client mappings are essential. Client mappings are essentially your filter, and then the report templates. So managing or editing the template so that you have the two building blocks in order to send. So the client mappings, they determine how a company name appears across your data sources. So when you're adding a client mapping, this is allowing you to create a single report that can be filtered and sent to multiple clients at the same time. So we can mass send, or we can send these reports in bulk, save time. Time is money, right? So let's go over how to create a client mapping. So I have a couple screenshots here. I'm going to highlight the key buttons that you'll want to navigate to. When you're adding a client mapping, this is found in the data drop-down menu. So at the top right corner of your Brightgauge window, you have that data drop-down, and then you'll see client mappings. So when we add a client, we do want to make sure that we have all data sources already configured. If you're planning on adding 3, 4, or 10 data sources, you want to make sure that those are connected to the Brightgauge account first. That way we can pull that client's data from all of those data sources. So we're going to click Add a Client. And the first step just name the client mapping. So I would recommend to put the client's name as you want it to appear for them. So, limit the abbreviations. If it has, Inc. or company, put that in the name as well. And then the second search box here is just where we're going to search for the company. So here I just typed out ABC and it did pull up the client, ABC Restaurant Tampa. So you want to make sure that the client is being pulled from all of the associated data sources that you have. So you'd want to see a little green bubble on each of these data source tiles at the left. In this screenshot, for example, we don't see any green bubble on the CPQ tile. So if maybe this company is not set up in CPQ, then that would be okay. But if they are, we do definitely want to make sure that we're pulling their data from that data source as well. So once we have them pulled up and we've verified that that is the correct ABC company, we'll just click Save. And then there is just a second step to the client mapping, and that's going to be adding a recipient. So it is important to have a recipient listed in each client mapping. That way, the report knows who to send to. So on that three-dot menu, you could click there, and you can select Client Recipients. This window will pop up, and if we have that client already added in your breakage count, let's say they're added as a viewer. Possibly you gave that client access to a dashboard, so they might already appear in this list at the top. If so, you can easily select the checkbox next to their name. If you wanted to send this report to someone internally, maybe you would want to validate or verify the report before sharing it with the end client, then you could also select yourself. But in the case that the client is not added yet, then you'll just enter in their information here on the lower half of this window. So we'll enter their name, their email, click Add User, and then Save. You can add multiple client mappings multiple client recipients in one mapping. So whoever that report needs to go to, enter their info here. Okay, so client mappings is really just two steps. It's a manual process, but once those are set up, then you're good to send out reports in bulk again. So you can send one template to multiple client mappings and make it really easy, simple. We're going to cover how to schedule the reports. So we really want to make it seamless and save you time. Okay, so we're going to cover report templates and the options that you have, how to edit them, how to combine data. So in the reports tab of your Brightgauge account, you will see the templates that you have available. The report templates will come out of the box from each of your data sources. So you'll see different templates from the PSA data source, from the RMM data source, or if you have any other data sources with Brightgauge, they do bring in their own default report templates. So we've already built something for you. We really want to save you time. We really don't want you to have to recreate the wheel. So when you open a template, you'll likely want to customize it a little bit to make it make sense for your organization. When you open the template, you can add additional gauges. So on the left panel here, this is our gauge drawer. We can use that filter and sorting option. We can say, let's look at gauges from ConnectWise RMM and add some onto this client service review. Or let's add a couple of CSAT gauges. So we want to filter down by Smileback. If you're adding gauges, it's just a simple checking of the little checkbox next to the gauge name. So there where you have that circle, just click them. They'll add on to the bottom of the report, and then you can arrange as needed. So it might make sense to arrange all gauges of, specific data source together, and have, here's your ticket summary, and then separately, here's your machine summary, so that it's very easy to read and each, user or recipient can understand each section. You can definitely change the names. So we've made the names pretty broad. They're pretty, simple. So maybe you change the name. You could, certainly put your company name there, of course. And if you upload your logo in your account details tab, that will appear there in place of that ConnectWise logo. So, for example, as I mentioned, we would want to combine data, right? BrightGauge is meant to be a single pane of glass. So in order to consolidate data into one easy to read report, we do want to add gauges from other tools onto one template. So this is where you can use that filters and sorting menu here at the left. You can filter down by a folder. Maybe you have created some gauges. You added them to your folder, so you can easily find them there. Or maybe you want to filter by data source, or even by data set. So in this case, just at the top of this report, we have gauges that are from ConnectWise RMM, we have gauges from PSA, and we also have gauges from Smileback. So I can combine the data into one report, and this limits the need for multiple reports from multiple tools. So consolidate and make it concise. So once you have modified your template, so we're just updating the template, we're customizing it, we're making it work for you, then you can also modify the email that comes with that template. So here in this last step, we're just updating the body of the email, essentially. We have available template tokens here. So if you want to plug in something different, recipient, first name, last name, you'll see all of the tokens there just by clicking that green available template tokens option. You can also just type out in the body of the email. So here where I have typed out, customize the body of your report email, you can type out anything. Maybe you want to add a link. You can add a link. You can completely revamp this email so that it makes sense, again, for your organization and makes sense for the recipient. So once you've updated the body, you can just click save, and that is saving the template. So we're saving that so that we can use it quickly and easily once we're ready to schedule and or send. Okay, so let's now go through the actual delivery of a report. We have some options. We can create a scheduled report. We can easily send reports ad hoc as well. So let's go through that. So if you wanted to create a new scheduled report, so this short video here, it's going to run in a loop. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to our report section. We're going to click that green create report. We'll choose for my client, and this is where you can select your client mappings. So maybe you select all of them at once. So in this case, I selected all client recipient or all client mappings, or you can pick and choose. You can hand select if needed. So click the create report button, and then for my client, and then select the client mappings. Once you've moved through that preview or template area, we've already updated that, so we don't need to make changes. In the final sending window, this is where we are actually going to send this out. We have the option to schedule. So if you know that you want to send a recurring report, then set it up once, schedule it, and then you can sort of set it and forget it. Now, the first step here is in the to window. If we are sending a report to any client mappings, then the option that we want to choose here is all client recipients. And you can see that at the top in the to window. All client recipients refers to the recipients listed in each client mapping. So ABC company is going to send to only the recipients listed in ABC company's client mapping. That's very important to make sure that you're selecting only that option. And if you click into the to window, that option just appears right at the top. So it's very easy for you. In sort of the center of this window, we have those checkboxes. This is where we can attach a PDF. If the client needs something printable, or if they want to save these reports in a folder, then attach a PDF. There's no harm in doing that. But by default, the body of the email will have the live report link. And the live report link will give them that drill down functionality. So if you want them to have additional details in the data, then that live link is great. The other checkbox here is, of course, schedule report. So the schedule report button will give you the options daily, weekly, monthly. And of course, if you want to send it quarterly, you're just going to choose monthly and repeat every 3 months. When you are scheduling your reports, it is important to understand that any scheduled report, all of the data sets being used on the report, they will run through a full sync 1 hour before the schedule. So if the goal is to send a report at end of day, if you want to make sure you're capturing all data, send that report maybe 1 hour after your day ends. So that 1 hour sync delay is important to just keep in mind. The last option here in the center of this sending window is that authentication toggle. If that authentication toggle is turned on, it will require the recipient to validate their email address using a one-time password. So they'll enter their email, it'll send them a one-time password, and they will be required to enter that one-time password in order to view that report template. So that adds an extra layer of security. And you can enable this for all reports as well. There's no harm in doing that. Just make sure that, the desired recipient is going to see that report. So that's very essential. In your reports tab of your Brightgauge account, if you do go to the Sent tab here on the left, you can toggle on Authenticate for any report that is already sent out. So you have that authentication toggle on the right. And if you want to lock that down, then you have options to lock that in place. So that just ensures that all of those reports you've already sent out will require authentication, and that user, the end user, will be required to validate their email anytime they want to see that live report link. It is important to understand that if you send a PDF, that PDF is in the body of the email. It's attached. So the recipient would be able to view the PDF without authenticating. So just important to note the differences there. All right, so report maintenance. So we can update or edit existing templates. We can also modify any scheduled report. As you go and send these reports out, there is always going to be some room for improvement, or maybe you need to make some modifications. So we can easily modify something that's already scheduled. We don't have to recreate it, and we can just resend it with any updated data, updated client mappings. To modify an already scheduled report, in your Reports tab, there is a Scheduled tab. So up on the left, we have Sent, we have Scheduled, and then we have the templates. So if you click on scheduled, you will see what you have currently scheduled. It will also tell you the schedule type. So does that go daily, monthly? And then it also will tell you if that is scheduled for a client or multiple clients. If you simply click on that scheduled report, so just click the name of it, it will open up this second window here where it says, for my client, and you can modify the client mappings that are selected here. So you can choose, you can select additional or maybe a client offboarded and you uncheck them so you can easily update something there if needed. So the reports tab, we'll go to scheduled, we'll click the report, and then here we can easily check or uncheck any client mappings. And that's a really easy way to then modify that part of it. We can still also modify the contents of the report or the body of the email. So you'll have each step available to make updates. If we need to adjust the schedule, change the time, maybe change the cadence, we can do that. So once you have updated the client mappings or changed the body or the contents of the report, you can update the schedule, attach PDF, update the body. So essentially you're just walking through the same steps and you'll just click schedule report. And that's how you're updating it. So there's no need to recreate that report. You can just add clients or make modifications as needed. So a couple of recaps, reminders. When you're sending reports, focus on your audience, the data, and the delivery. So this should be really simple. So who are you sending this to? Who's reading it? And are they going to understand the data that you're sharing? The data should be clear, concise. It doesn't have to be a lengthy multi-page report. I would say, any longer than 3 pages, it might be hard for someone to actually read that. So you want to make sure your efforts are seen and you're not doing too much that, doesn't really provide value for that client. And then the delivery, deciding on the delivery schedule, the day of the month that this is sent out is important, and deciding, how often. So are you meeting with them monthly or is it quarterly? Having those meetings is also important to make sure that you're able to provide context, explain anything, and just align with your client. Communication is really important. So the report should be clear and concise, make it relevant. Some data is more important for you to see internally than for it to be shared with the client. And then all data sets will run through a full sync 1 hour prior to the report schedule. So keep that in mind when deciding on the hour that you're sending. The live link that will be in the report by default, it has drill down functionality. So the client will be able to click into the gauges and see the drill down. They'll be able to see those associated details. So that might provide additional value for them, or that might provide more confusion for them. So deciding on whether to share that live link or maybe just the PDF is also important. The PDF can also be, you can easily add that to any report live link, just so that there's something that's printable in case you have in-person meeting. That is helpful. And then always keep room for adjustments. You can easily update any scheduled report that you have just by clicking on what is sent, modifying it. You can modify the mappings, you can modify the body, the contents, without needing to recreate them. Okay, so we went through that pretty quickly. We have plenty of time to run through some questions. So I would love to hear from you guys. If you have questions, you can use the question box in your platform, and you can go ahead and chat them there. I'll read through a couple, and I will see if I can read them off.
Julie, if you like, I could also read some of the older ones that came in that I've been saving for you because I wasn't quite sure.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know this or if this is something that we would have to ask product, but do we know, will third-party patch data be added for ConnectWise Automate and BrightGauge?
Regarding Automate, I think that will probably be a best question to send in, and we can check with product to see if that would be available in the future for Automate.
So Dylan, that's a great question to share out on the virtual community because product is out there checking and looking out there for the features. So if there is something like that you're looking for, I highly recommend putting it out there in the virtual community.
Yeah, the virtual community is a great place to post questions or feedback and really connect with other ConnectWise partners. So we really do love promoting that. We also share a lot of updates there from Partner Success. So you'll see tips from Partner Success shared on the virtual community page, and we give a lot of good feedback and how to. So it's a great place to visit.
Do you know, is there a way to export a report of client mappings? Lori has a large number of clients and usually a handful change names each quarter. Is looking for an easy way to validate and reconcile that.
At this point, we don't have any way to export the data that is in your client mappings, but certainly it's a great piece of feedback. So we can bring that back to the team and mention it as, maybe a future update.
And is there a max amount on the client sites you can add to one map from RMM?
There shouldn't be a max of sites that you can add to a mapping. When you're searching, it might hit a limit of 50, but you can easily add additional sites just manually through that client mapping. There's a search option, and you can type out the additional site if needed.
And then how long with the scheduled reports, how long is that link good for? If a customer wants to go back and look at 2 years ago, is that still going to work? And is it going to be the data from 2 years ago, or is it going to refresh and get current data?
The report live links, when they are sent out, that is a snapshot. So depending on what the gauges have as far as the date range, if they look at previous quarter, then if that live report link is visited 2 years later, then the gauges are still looking at previous quarter 2 years ago. So essentially, the reports, the live link, it doesn't update. It is a snapshot in time, and it does just depend on the gauge date filter of what that time frame looks like. As long as your BrightGauge account is active, and as long as that report in your sent folder still exists there, the live link will be able to be visited at any point. So if a client did want to click it again, a year later, 2 years later, it'll still open up and show data from that time period, 2 years ago. So that's a good question.
Well, and that was kind of a conglomerate of a couple of questions. I was kind of merging them here into one for you.
Yeah, no worries.
If you turn on the authentication, can you see when they've actually opened a report then? Do you see that they've authenticated?
It does not give you any record or audit trail of when a report is opened, regardless if the authenticate is turned on or not. So either way, you unfortunately won't be able to see when that client has clicked the live report link.
So, and if I update a report in the report section with new gauges, does it automatically pull through to the scheduled report, or do I need to reschedule it?
So if you update a gauge that is being used on a report template, if you click on save and update on the gauge, wherever that gauge might live, whether it be on a report that's scheduled or a dashboard, that gauge will update. So the key point here is if you create a new gauge, then you have a new copy and that wouldn't be included. But if you update the current gauge, it will reflect anywhere that that gauge lives.
Can you change
So
the
these are all
owner
great
of
questions.
Can you change the owner of reports or dashboard?
Change the owner as in who initially created the report. If that is the question, if you modify the template, it will change who modified it. But as far as who created it initially, that their name wouldn't change unless that template was modified.
So I have a question here. Virtual community asking if it equals ConnectWise Hub. And no, the virtual community you can access either from your ConnectWise home or from the ConnectWise University under the community tab. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I can see a couple here. We have a question from Sarah. She's building an internal employee report to examine utilization. So how can I filter the utilization gauge so it filters for a single employee? So today we really focused on client reports. So we didn't touch on one aspect of the report that you can use, and that is the filtering. So if you are sending an internal report, there is add a filter option on the report. It is in the designing screen, so where you would add gauges. So if you have a utilization gauge and you want to filter that down for one member, you can click on add a filter and then choose member ID, or maybe it's ticket owner, and filter down for just that one member, and you can send that out to them. So, again, we didn't focus on more internal reporting capabilities, but that's certainly something you can do. You can add filters if needed. So good question there. I do see another question here. Nathan mentions that I struggle with multiple report admins making changes between a scheduled report and the template. How do I keep the changes current? So this is a great question because we can kind of touch on account management. In BrightGauge, if you are an admin, then any admin can really make changes to a template, to a scheduled report. So if you want to limit that, then you might want to consider making others analysts. Analysts will only have access to the report templates or the dashboards or data sets that you, the admin, give them access to. So it's a great way to kind of limit the hands in the pot. If you set up someone as an analyst, they can still build gauges, they can still run reports, but they'll have reduced permissions. So as an admin, you can control what they have access to, and that might be better for you to just make sure that changes aren't happening without your knowledge. So we have some other questions. I'm just going to read through some of these. And as you guys are asking questions, if we don't get to you, we would be happy to answer your questions offline out of the webinar. You can easily email partnersuccess@connectwise.com. And we're happy to set up a meeting with you. We would love to, touch base and really help you with your unique breakage tenant. Some of the questions here might be more specific to your use case. So we're so happy to help, and setting up a meeting with us is going to be beneficial. So we have
And I should recommend taking it out to the virtual community too, because not even can you hear from those of us who are at ConnectWise, who are out in the virtual community answering these questions. Julia, myself, product, we're all out there. But also, just it's great sometimes to get feedback on how other partners are doing it, so you can learn from each other. It's a great community of co-opetition.
Yeah, that is a great point. It's really helpful to see what others are doing with the products and kind of understand others' use cases. One thing that Breakage we've been doing for a while now is we have user showcase webinars, and that's another example of where we share what our partner has done with the Breakage account, and you're able to see how they've implemented Breakage, how they create their dashboards, reports. So having that community, ConnectWise really promotes the community aspect, and I think that sets us apart from others. So it's really, super helpful. Definitely join the virtual community, and definitely check out the Breakage webinars page too for those user showcase webinar series.
I have a question here from somebody who has some large customers. Is there a way to get more than 500 results on a gauge? So they have large customers that some of the data is missing on the reports due to that restriction.
Yeah, so this is referencing a table gauge or maybe a list gauge where we do have a limit of 500 rows showing. So at this point, that is the limit. I would maybe suggest changing the gauge type. I think having 500 rows in any gauge, if you're presenting that to a client, it might be difficult for them to actually parse through or scroll through that anyway. What you can do is if you change that gauge type to maybe a number gauge, then it will show you the full count of records. And then if the client requests that they want, every record, every line, you do have the ability to export the CSV. It would be something that you would be required to do for them, but just in case they need that. But I think 500 rows is quite a lot of data, so I would maybe be interested to discuss kind of what's being shown there. But I think there are other ways to get the total in a better visual, if that helps.
We have people who are concerned about the age of data, that we can only get data that's 240 days. I do know, Julie, you and I have both been in on those meetings with product where that is something that is on their list. It's just something they are working on. I've definitely seen a couple of questions out here on that. So I recommend for those of you who are interested in this, get out on the virtual community and just look for and follow up on that topic and make it known. And, the more people who act for it, the higher it gets moved up sometimes on the priority list.
Yeah, definitely. We hear you, and we definitely understand that need. We do have a couple of sort of current solutions there. If you are using ConnectWise PSA, we do have the option of cloud data access. So cloud database access, if you reference that, we can certainly send additional information there, but it does allow you to have access to longer data sets, almost as if you're using ConnectWise PSA on premise. I do have I see a couple more questions. So I'll answer maybe one or two last questions, and then we are going to wrap up. So we have Phil asked, can you please take us through the process of adding a dashboard template by referencing the build out key? So what Phil is asking about is we have a dashboard of the month example with build out keys. This is a document. This is a page that you can find on our website. And those build out keys are meant to show you how to replicate that dashboard example in your own account. So it's going to show you what data set to use, what gauge type to use, and essentially walk you through the steps of building that in your own account. So we don't have an import option, but it gives you the key to follow. So it's the recipe essentially of how to build those gauges. So I do see questions regarding, what's next for BrightGauge. I think those are all really great questions and good feedback for us. I think it would be great for us to have a webinar where we can share what is new, what we have released and what we have coming on the roadmap. We do also try to hold account reviews with each and every one of you. If you have not had an account review with your partner success manager, definitely reach out to us, because that is where we share all of the items we have released in the last year. And we also will share what we have on our roadmap. So those meetings are very important for us to share what we've done. A lot of product updates or adjustments, they might get missed. So we really want to share that with you, demo that with you, and also take your feedback. We really do appreciate it, and we really do pass it along to all other teams.